Welcome everyone to our first podcast on postdocs of Washington University in St. Louis. Today we will interview Dr. Aishwarya Rajesh. Links to her webpage and research publications are in the description of this video. So let's welcome our guest. Welcome Ash, it's a pleasure to have you join us today on our podcast. Could you please tell us about your educational and professional background?
Yeah, happy to. So I'm going to start off this with a story. So there's an image of my uncle that I remember from 10th grade, and my parents were taking me in an auto rickshaw, which is a public scooter in India. And they just told me that my dad actually had an older brother with a mental health condition called schizophrenia. And I was shocked. First of all, did not know my dad had an older brother, and B, that there was a condition called schizophrenia. So it was the first time they disclosed this information to me as we entered the Kilpauk Mental Health Facility in Chennai, India. And my first interaction with my uncle, the image that really stands out is seeing him literally devour cookies and snacks that my parents had brought for him. I think it was the very first concrete evidence I had of how poorly he was being taken care of in that facility. And it made me reflect on how the mental health system in that facility is so disintegrated. So that image actually spurred this urge to understand human suffering. And that's led me through to three different ways that I relate to that urge to understand human suffering. One is the research side, then there's the clinical side, and there's the statistical language that I use to understand the different models of human suffering. So I'll start off with the research side, and typically my research tries to understand this human suffering from two perspectives. One is the inside-out approach. So I try to understand how the structure and functional characteristics of the brain, how it relates to mental health conditions. So a question I ask is, well, what is it about the brain that becomes a determinant of behavior and cognition? So I've primarily looked at patients with traumatic brain injury, or TBI, to answer this question. So I have looked at how once someone has a traumatic brain, they often develop depression and anxiety disorders. And how do those mood and anxiety disorders arise as a result of this brain injury? Then there's the outside-in approach, where I look at how lifestyle interventions promote emotional health and alter brain functioning. So I've primarily looked at this in older adults. My dissertation was focused on a theater acting intervention in older adults, looking at this exact question. And this interventional research in particular has helped me appreciate this bi-directional relationship between research and clinical practice. So I forgot to preface this, but I got my PhD in clinical psychology. That's the second side of the lines of work that I have. So in the clinical side, my grad training was primarily in individuals with mood and anxiety disorders. And a lot of my postdoctoral work has focused on acquired brain injury. Here I've looked at or worked with individuals with brain tumors, often at the last stage. And so I apply an existential framework to understand factors that might contribute to some change, some alleviation of their depressive and anxiety symptoms. So that's the research side, the clinical side, and then there's the statistics side. And here I try to connect brain and behavior models. So both from the in and out approach and the outside in approach that I just talked about a few moments ago. And during my graduate school, worked as a grad consultant, statistical consultant. I'm working on university level projects, providing consulting to individuals from different career stages. As a postdoc, I've worked as an ad hoc statistical consultant. And I'm currently an editorial fellow at the Association of Psychological Science, where I work for a quantitative based journal. So these are my three different lines of work, and I hope I answered that question.
Yeah, sure. Thank you.
Yeah, as you talked about a little bit about your PhD and even a little bit about the transitions you've done from the PhD to postdoc, could you talk a little bit more about how your research has changed from your PhD to your postdoc now?
Thank you, Honey, for that question. I think I'll start off with first saying how they're the same, and we'll just spend a moment on this, and then I'll talk about how they're different. So I still seek to understand human suffering, ways to alleviate human suffering, and using brain behavior relationships as a model to do so. In terms of the differences, so in grad school, I used group level analyses. So I clubbed individuals together and into groups to try to understand differences between groups. And these employed robust research designs like randomized control trials. They also, in grad school, use smaller time points. So, say I have one time point before an intervention took place and one time point after an intervention took place. Now, at the postdoc level, that's changed a lot. So instead of group level analyses, I now focus on individual level analyses that help me truly appreciate the differences across individuals, right? So let's just take example of a traumatic brain injury. So while in my graduate school work, I lumped individuals with different kinds of traumatic brain injuries. So someone might have a traumatic brain injury as a soldier from war, due to domestic abuse, due to a fall, due to a car accident. In my individual level work here, I try to honor that individual for their differences, right? So it's unfair to lump someone who came just from a war with someone who just had a fall. And the location of the injuries could also be different, right? So for that reason, also, it's not fair to lump people together. So for instance, someone from a fall might have an injury to the front of their head, the frontal lobe. Someone who's coming from a war might have hit the side of their head or the temporal lobe. So trying to understand these individual differences. And I also try to understand the differences within the individual. Right. So this idea that human experiences and the capacity to reflect are constantly changing the individual. Right. So I employ many more time points than just the 2 time points or 2 or 3 time points that I employed at the grad student at the student level. So for instance, in my current work, I'm tracking individuals who've just had a head injury over 6 months of their injury, but I invite them into the scanner environment every week. So ours is probably the first study with as many as 27 data points in terms of the brain recovery process, as well as their cognitive and emotional functioning. So short answer, group level in grad, individual level here. And I think at the postdoc level, I ask richer, more nuanced, and really more thoughtful questions.
Thank you, Ash, for the great explanation. So, is your current work also involve intervention, or is it like only focused on understanding how the disorder is changing over time?
Yeah, my current work is at this moment focusing only on tracking changes in brain recovery in traumatic brain injury. Hopefully in the future.
Yeah. And what type of modalities are you using to track down those changes?
Yeah, so I use neuroimaging. So I invite people into an MRI scanner. So right after they've had their TBI or traumatic brain injury, 1 week after that, typically, um, and they are put into this environment where I can study the structural and functional changes in their brain. It's really cool.
So, are you using any specific tool for converting those structure and functional properties into any features and then understanding how are those features changing over time?
Yeah, so there are different modalities and specific software applications that you can use to analyze brain data. So you can do something known as diffusion tensor imaging, which tries to understand how the white matter tracks that connect different areas of the brain, how they may be damaged due to TBI, and how there's a recovery process for those tracks too. Or different parts of the brain tend to co-activate together, and we think they're corresponding with each other, right? And that might be disrupted as a result of the injury. So the frontal lobe, in very layman terms, might not be talking as much to the temporal lobe anymore. And that might be due to the injury process. And so we try to understand how that recovers over time. So
Okay.
did that answer your question, Rashad?
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Ash. I think your work is really beautiful, and we are sure gaining from all the work you've been doing. And now I'd like to ask a question as a postdoc at WashU. So, what special opportunities have you received as a postdoc at WashU specifically?
Yeah, I will tell you, I have the real privilege of working with some of the best minds in the country. And this might be a little bold, but I think I am in one of the best, if not the best, human-centered neuroimaging lab in the country. There is a rich dynamism in my workplace. In fact, I've had to close the door now because otherwise people would just come in and start. And people are always forming gatherings to discuss scientific ideas. You can walk up to people's offices. People's offices are always open here, and asked to discuss ideas or gaps in my own understanding with these individuals who are really incredibly way smart. Some of them MD PhDs. And in each of these instances, I'm never made to feel stupid, which is really wonderful. I mean, they truly are exceptionally people. I've never felt ashamed or uncomfortable saying, I don't get this. I don't understand it. And people are always willing. In fact, there's a genuine urge to help. And I truly mean that. And it really fosters that sense of community and belonging. Like, I feel like I found my home here. And so I feel like that's a privilege I have in this space.
Ash, you are also the president of WUPS. So, can you explain what is WUPS and how does its executive council work?
Hey, so thank you, Rishabh. WashU Postdoc Society, otherwise known as WUPS, is a 4 postdocs, 5 postdocs organization. And really, any postdoc entering the university is automatically a part of WUPS. And is welcome to join any of our meetings. We typically meet on the first Thursday of every month at 9 a.m. And in these meetings, we talk about organizing events that foster career development, leadership, and community. And we have 4 committees. So there's the Networking and Wellness Committee. And this committee is just make sure you're having fun. It really, it offers you access to resources that really support your mental and physical health well-being. So in the past, we've organized events like a paintball zombie event, an ice skating party, pizza party, a barbecue event. All of them are major hits. So it's a lot of fun. Um, and this committee also organizes coffee hours, and I've been to a few of those coffee hours, and they're a lot of fun. Um, Great. And another committee is the policy committee. So this committee really advocates for equity and improvement of current policies that affect postdocs. So, for instance, our most recent endeavor has been to clearly specify our designation as postdoctoral researchers or scholars or associates, rather than lumping us together as staff or other, as is often done in the mass emails that are sent out to our academic community. The third organization is Outreach Committee. So this promotes engagement of postdocs with other groups. So as part of this committee, we've held the immigration seminar, which is particularly pertinent to international postdocs. And we've gotten feedback that it's really important to international postdocs, and it's very helpful. We have small interest groups on our postdoc Slack channel. Then we also have this really cool rapid fire round where we highlight postdocs, what inspires them, how they engage with science. So really getting a sense of their world or tapping into their world. And finally, we have the Career Development Committee, where we organize events that promote both academic as well as non-academic careers. So, for instance, in the past, we've organized events like the K99 brand, right? Non-traditional career paths in academia, as well as Black postdoctoral experiences. And all of these events have been very well received in us. The four committees, the Networking and Wellness, the Policy Committee, the Outreach Committee, and the Career Development Committee. And if you're interested, you're welcome to join one or more of these committees, or even just to feel out each of these different spaces.
Yeah. Thank you, Ash.
So that's really great, this initiative that WUPS is doing for postdocs. And as you mentioned the career, and I feel that you encourage other postdocs to become part of WUPS as doing a more active participation. How has WUPS helped you in your career?
So thank you, Honey, for that question. So the WashU Postdoc Society, or WUPS, also has an executive committee, and that's the committee that organizes various events. And I found that through the organization of these events with the EC, as well as through these events, the way I've been able to connect with the broader postdocs who form part of WUPS, I have had the privilege of really tapping into their worlds. And, through understanding what their world is like, their worldview is like, how they engage with science, I found commonalities, shared vulnerabilities, but in the differences too, in terms of the science that we do, in terms of the way we engage with science, it's really empowered me because it's prevented me from closing down into my own space and really opening up to the different ways we can engage with science, different ways we can engage as a community. So the short answer to all of that is it does build a sense of community and belonging that are important to me, that I increasingly invest in as I advance in my career. But it also has helped expand my dimensions of thinking. It's helped me think in ways, my own research that have held my research forward. I also had the privilege of being a recent Boucher Graduate Honor inductee as part of being a president of WUPS. Through this organization, I got to go to Yale and meet people from different universities who are all incredibly bright, network with other graduate students and postdocs, and hopefully build a research career through these different networks. So it's been incredibly helpful from a professional development perspective. It's also helped in boosting my diversity statements. I have to write those diversity statements as part of my faculty applications that I'm applying for this year and perhaps the next cycle, and also as a way to demonstrate leadership and service. So for all of these things, WUPS has been incredibly helpful in advancing my career.
Thanks a lot, Ash, for sharing your personal and professional experiences. Now, I do have only one question for you. So, if you could give only one piece of advice about maintaining work-life balance as a researcher, what it would be?
Thank you, Rishabh, for that question. So for me, I think what's helped is this duality of flexibility and structure. Flexibility as in taking a step back, taking a broader perspective, being able to even let go of things like shifting from one project to another. So that's the flexibility piece. The structure piece, as a postdoc, there's a lot of space to explore and investigate, which is great, but there's no formal sense of structure. As we had in grad school, where we had courses and a set goal, a dissertation to work toward. So I say without any shame or embarrassment that I actually hired an academic coach. And I love my coach. She's fantastic. I hired her through the NCFDD program, which is for faculty development. And every week I meet with her and review what I accomplished, what I did not accomplish, what resistances I faced. And she provides me with tools and strategies that I could perhaps use the next week. So I find that she helps me build a sense of structure into my life that I otherwise would not be able to do. So flexibility and structure.
Thank you. A big thank you to Ash for being a wonderful guest and adding so much value to our podcast. We are grateful for your presence.
Thank you, Rishabh, and thank you, Honey.